Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is a morning update. Hey, what's going on, everybody? So, a quick rundown for today. Obviously, right now we have our morning update. After the morning update, later on today, we'll have episode 4 of our Core 4 series. And after that, we'll finish off the evening with a daily drop like usual. So we have a 3-episode day today, plenty of content for you guys. I know everybody's bored, hanging out at home, looking for something to do. Well, I got you covered for today. 3 episodes of content, 3 episodes of my fat yap running. I know everybody's just so pumped to hear it. So I hope everybody's staying safe. I know that everybody is, it's a time of uncertainty, right? It's a time where we have a lot of questions. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. We don't know how long we're going to have to deal with this. So all I could say to everybody out there is just, try and stay as positive as possible. Try and stay as busy as possible. And this is going to pass as well, like everything else does. We just got to stay focused and we have to stay sharp because everybody wants their life back. Everybody wants things to get back to normal. But while we're locked down, while everybody's stuck at home, might as well be productive and dive deep into the Jeffrey Epstein case. With that said, we have an article today from the Rolling Stone. And this article is an interview with Bradley Edwards. Now, we've talked a lot about Bradley Edwards in the last few weeks, I should say week and a half or so, about his new book coming out, Relentless Pursuit, and the excerpts that we've heard from the book leading up to the release on March 31st were just very, very awesome, very informative, very important additions to the catalog. And, it was a real look behind the scenes of what somebody on the front line battling for these survivors dealt with as they were trying to take down Jeffrey Epstein and his associates. So Bradley Edwards has been involved in this case since the beginning almost. And what he has done for these survivors is it's very important to point out the sort of man that Bradley Edwards obviously is. Look, I don't know the man. I've never talked to him. I've never sent a message to him or received a message from him or anything like that. But from what I have seen and what I have read and the things that he has done as far as insert himself as somebody who wants justice in this case, you can't do anything but give this guy a tip of the hat, right? A nod of the head and say to yourself, well, this guy definitely belongs on the rolls of heroes when it comes to the Jeffrey Epstein case. And this book is an expose on what he went through and how he saw the case through his eyes. So it's an important book to buy. If you haven't purchased it yet, I highly suggest you go out and do that. I have about an hour and a half left to listen to on Audible, and then I will be finished with the whole book, and all I can say is it's informative as hell, and it is a fantastic read. A fantastic read. So in about 2 weeks from now, when everybody's had a chance to purchase it or read it or listen to it, I'll do a review on the book as a whole, and we'll talk about it as a whole for an episode as a whole piece of work, right? As opposed to just some excerpts and sound bites. So today will be the last time we talk about Bradley Edwards' book, as in article-wise, until a few weeks. But this this ad in the Rolling Stone here, this interview with Bradley Edwards, is a very good addition to the catalog, and it's very informative. So make sure that if you haven't purchased this book, you definitely grab it. And also, Filthy Rich by James Patterson is another one you definitely have to grab. All right, so let's see what this article has to say. The article is from the Rolling Stone. The headline, Who is the Real Jeffrey Epstein? In his new book, attorney Bradley J. Edwards details the decade he spent on the case against billionaire pedophile Jeffrey Epstein. And I like how the author calls him a billionaire pedophile right off the bat. I always change that in the articles. If somebody's calling him like a financier or something like that, I'll always add pedophile instead because I think it's more fitting, right? I think it's more important to call him what he is as opposed to beat around the bush. We know what Jeffrey Epstein was. No reason to beat around the bush. This article was written by Nina Burley. Billionaire pedophile Jeffrey Epstein knew a lot of powerful men's secrets, from princes to captains of industry and global political leaders. but he protected his own behind teams of powerful lawyers who battled up until his death last summer to keep the black box of his sordid world sealed shut. Yeah, we've seen it tooth and nail. We've seen the way they battle to keep this guy's information private, even in death. And normally, when someone dies, that's when all the beans are spilled, right? All the information about that person becomes available, and the vultures show up to the corpse to get some picking in. Not with Jeffrey Epstein. His secrets are even more protected, it seems, in death. And that leads you to say to yourself, all right, well, why is this guy different? Why is he being so protected? Who is protecting him? And I think we've established who is protecting him throughout our 370 episodes here on the podcast and elsewhere. We understand that this is more than just a trafficking ring. We understand that this man was being protected by very, very, very powerful people. But he protected his own behind teams of powerful lawyers who battled up into his death last summer to keep the black box of his sordid world sealed shut. He and his lawyers presumed they could mute powerless underage female sex abuse victims, and they succeeded until Florida attorney Bradley J. Edwards got involved in their case in 2008. And like last night, we talked about how he paid off the gal from last night who ended up dying from a overdose, Lee Patrick. She died of a heroin overdose after dealing with Epstein, and after Epstein paid her $50,000 for her to keep quiet. So we know that he was slanging around money for forever to keep girls quiet. And the question is, how many of these girls ended up with the same fate as Lee Patrick? How many of these girls ended up in, a drug-induced world of addiction because of the abuse they suffered at the hands of Jeffrey Epstein and his associates? Edwards got involved in their case in 2008. Edwards eventually represented 20 of the women in a lawsuit against the government for its 2007 sweetheart deal with Epstein, a deal obtained in spite of overwhelming evidence that Epstein was engaged in a systematic sex abuse and human trafficking ring. Yeah, that's spot on. There's nothing to add there. That's exactly what occurred. We know how devious the prosecution was in this case. We know that they missed the boat. We know that they missed the mark. We know that they helped the defense in defaming these gals. We know that. The question is, why doesn't the public know that yet? Palm Beach, Florida, police had evidence from dozens of teenage girls that Epstein preyed upon young, poor women, grooming them to participate in sex acts with him and other men. But Epstein's fleet of pricey lawyers, including Harvard law professor Alan Dershowitz and former Clinton special prosecutor Kenneth Starr, wheedled a negotiated plea out of the justice system in which Epstein got less than a year of local jail time and was allowed to work from his Palm Beach mansion during the day. Yeah, because that's normal, right? That's normal behavior. That's what happens to normal people. They get involved in a sex trafficking ring, leadership position, they're abusing girls or raping girls, and, they only get a 13-month stay where they don't even have to be in the jail. They have a wing to themselves, the door's open, so they have access to the lawyer room whenever they want. Yeah, par for the course for normal people. I mean, are you kidding me right now? How is this even possible? How was this able to occur when it was occurring? Where were all the city council people? Where were all of the prosecutors? Where was the mayor? Where was the governor? Where was anybody, for God's sakes? Edwards' lawsuit and other pressure on the Department of Justice, including a scathing expose in the Miami Herald, ultimately led to a new investigation and Epstein's arrest as he stepped off his private jet at a New Jersey airport tarmac last year. And that's another thing that bothers me. When he got arrested, why wasn't he perp walked? You see all these other people. Look at Harvey Weinstein getting the perp walk. Look at Bill Cosby getting the perp walk, but not Jeffrey Epstein? Why were they still giving him special treatment after he was arrested? Why didn't he get perp walked? Why wasn't CNN waiting for him there? Why wasn't all the major outlets waiting at the airport to see him get arrested, etc., etc.? Ask yourselves, why did Jeffrey Epstein deserve so much special treatment from the government? What could possibly motivate them to protect him in this way? In his new book about the saga, Relentless Pursuit, My Fight for the Victims of Jeffrey Epstein, Edwards, co-written with trial lawyer Brittany Henderson, shares insights into Epstein's psychology, strategies, and vast networks of enablers from lawyers like Dershowitz to his alleged procurer, co-conspirator, Ghislaine Maxwell. Maxwell has denied any wrongdoing. Oh, of course she has. We know that. We know that Ghislaine is never going to come out and say that she was involved. She's going to have to be compelled to testify. She's going to have to be compelled to come forward, because a person like this, forget about it. There's zero chance she's going to incriminate herself. There's zero chance she's going to do anything that might cause her to end up in jail. So she's going to have to be actively searched out and actively prosecuted. Edwards talked to Rolling Stone from his office in Palm Beach about why he believes Epstein killed himself in jail, where Ghislaine Maxwell is, whether the investigation continues and will reveal any more famous men's names, and rumors that Epstein and Maxwell worked for U.S. or Israeli intelligence. Well, when it comes to the intelligence aspect, you folks all know exactly where I'm at with that. Some people believe it was just a Mossad-run operation, and okay, that's cool, fine, if you want to believe that, that's all right. But in my opinion, dealing with intelligence and knowing how this sort of thing works, it's obvious that the CIA was the big brother here. It's obvious that the Mossad, their involvement, everything ran through the CIA. There is no way they could have set this up in the United States without the CIA being involved and without the CIA giving them the nod of approval. At the end of the day, the CIA wants this information as well. They're information brokers. So if they have dossiers on all of these famous people, which of course they would have access to if they gave the nod to the Mossad to run the operation, well, then they control these people. And we know that to intelligence agencies, information is the most important currency. So if you understand how the CIA works in an overarching way, and you understand how these operations are put into place, then you see how the big picture starts to unfold. And you see that the Mossad, while obviously a very potent intelligence service on their own, really is the little brother of the CIA, just like the Five Eyes of intelligence around the world. The CIA is the big brother, the CIA is the head honcho, and the spooks who work for the CIA are the ones who are overseeing stuff like this if it's happening in America, 100% without a doubt. There's zero chance something like this was going on under their noses without them knowing. So, again, there's a lot of people that want to just say that it was the Mossad, and I, agree that the Mossad had their role, of course, because we know Ghislaine Maxwell's connections to the Mossad. We know that her father was heavily connected to Israeli military intelligence. So we know that the Mossad angle definitely hunts. That's definitely something that 100%, this has all the hallmarks of a Mossad operation. But I think a lot of people are missing the point when it comes to the CIA and how involved the CIA is with the Mossad, and especially when it comes to an operation being run on American soil. I think it's naive at best to think the CIA had no involvement. Over the decade of depositions and discussions, you got to know Epstein as well as anyone. Can you describe his personality in a couple of sentences? He was always trying to take advantage of everyone and willing to engage in whatever tactic could advantage him to manipulate everyone around him in order to maintain power. And yeah, we know that he was a narcissist. We know that his ego was the size of the earth. And we know that he used intimidation and other tactics to make sure that he was always in the position of dominance. And he performed all of his duties like that, from financials to procurement and abuse of girls. It was all about power with Jeffrey Epstein. And you see it in cases like this. A lot of times it's all about power and being able to exert that power over the powerless. And that's definitely the kind of person Jeffrey Epstein was. And that sort of disgusting proclivity was harnessed by the people who are just as bad above him that were running this operation, in my opinion. Does that make him kind of a sociopath? Is there like a pathology there? Well, I'm not a psychologist, but this one I think is the easiest sociopath to identify. There is nobody who knew him who believes he operated with a conscience at all. He clearly only cared about himself, and he was constantly trying to make everyone believe he cared only about everyone else. He is the definition of a sociopath. Yeah, I've stated this as well. Look, Jeffrey Epstein was all about himself. He had this huge inflated idea about who he was, how smart he was, and his impact on the world. When in reality, we all understand that he truly didn't have any impact on the world. He was a guy with a lot of money and political connections, and he was able to be manipulated and used by these intelligence agencies. And it's ironic, right? When all was said and done and they were finished with Jeffrey Epstein, he was discarded like the same way he discarded these girls. So it's fitting for him to come to an end the way he did. He dies in jail and it's ruled a suicide. A lot of people think he didn't kill himself. Why do you believe that he did? Yeah, no doubt in my mind. His entire being was predicated on being the king and being in power and having control over everyone and everything at all times. Here is a guy who was a sex addict and of a particular type. He only engaged in sex acts with vulnerable people that he could control. The control and power was much more important to him than the sex, 100%. That's definitely spot on. I definitely agree with that. Jeffrey Epstein was all about power, control, and exerting that power. Of course, the sex was important to him because he got off by it, obviously. But the whole entire lead up to it, and the whole entire exertion of power over these survivors, that's what really got him going. That's what really got Jeffrey Epstein off. And whether the vulnerabilities that he was preying on was the young age of the victim, or the financial situation, or even the dancers and models of New York City who had a dream, and he could give them promises and then puppeteer the situation and manipulate them, it was being able to control all of these people and using sex to demean them, degrade them, humiliate them, and further control them. Definitely all the aspects of a sex cult, right? Jeffrey Epstein was the guru, and he had a certain blueprint for how he would groom these girls to be involved in his trafficking operation. And it would move on from the procurement stage to the grooming stage and then to the conversion stage. And Jeffrey Epstein had it down to a T. And like Bradley Edwards is saying here, it was all about power. It was all about power to him. In addition, he had all of these employees that he controlled with his money, and he basically roped them into his cult of recruiting other vulnerable people for him to manipulate through sex. Lastly, he doesn't care about any of these people, but he has these powerful people that are either well-known scientists, other world leaders, businessmen, people that are respected in society, the world's most respected people. And through his money and his other connections, he's able to control those people too. Well, I'd like to add to that, I believe the blackmail operation played a huge part in that as well. When you have dossiers on people and you have information that they were having sexual relations with underage girls, boy, that is the kind of thing that really destroys somebody. People can live through an affair, right? Oh, you had an affair on your wife, you stepped out on your wife. Kind of a scummy move, buddy, but all right. Comes to this, something like this, there's no coming back from this. So the ultimate form of control is information, and Jeffrey Epstein had that in spades. When he gets arrested, his entire life is taken from him. He's no longer sitting on a jet, living the life of a billionaire that is engaging in these sex acts 3 or 4 times a day. In fact, he goes from that overindulgence of sex to no sex. Once his bond is denied, his employees no longer fear him. He can't control them anymore. All of his powerful associates and associations begin turning on him. Whether it's Les Wexner or President Trump or Bill Clinton, everybody starts distancing themselves and saying how terrible a guy he was. That part of his world caved in too. That's for sure. I've said this from the beginning. After the second arrest, he was discarded as trash by his people. All the powerful people that protected him, the people that were running him as an asset, Les Wexner, all of them abandoned him and left Jeffrey Epstein left holding the bag, right? You're no longer getting this protection, and Epstein went from having the ultimate amount of political protection to having nothing. He went from somebody who had absolute control over literally everybody and everything at all times to having no control whatsoever. And that was not a life that he was ever going to live. The only thing he had left to control was himself. He was not going to be one on the other end of being controlled and powerless. So he took his own life. Well, look, that's definitely a plausible outline right there, right? Unfortunately, I can't believe that he killed himself until I see the evidence at this point. Because all the coincidences that led up to his suicide, they're just way too many coincidences for me to believe. Now, again, like I've said, if I see the evidence that points to him killing himself, I'm more than willing to accept that, right? Whatever the facts are in the case, I'm willing to accept. But there's just way too many coincidences right now for me to accept that. I'd actually need to see the same video that bar scene that he said showed him that Epstein did not take that Epstein did take his own life. And until I see that footage, it's going to take a whole hell of a lot of evidence to prove to me that Jeffrey Epstein did in fact kill himself. You said once bond was denied, employees no longer feared him. Did you know him to be violent, or what was the fear factor? Jeffrey Epstein would weave into all of his conversations with me an element of fear. He would tell me, Brad, you should stop prosecuting me or else somebody is going to get hurt. He would do it in a way that wasn't overtly intimidating, but there were only 2 people in the room. He was saying I was going to get hurt. Yeah, Epstein and his people, they worked in the world of threats, right? They were willing to make these kind of threats, and then they would follow through on them. They had access to a lot of powerful people, a lot of people in the world of intelligence, a lot of people that could really cause you a lot of grief. And Epstein was not scared to flaunt that power, and he was not scared to intimidate people with his connections. Through talking with many of my clients, many of them, he would make clear how powerful he was, that he had friends in high places, and would often weave in how some of his powerful friends had done bad things to people. How he can make people lose their jobs, lose their careers, and cause anyone who crossed him to suffer consequences. That was part of his natural way of dealing with everyone. There wasn't a single person that was ever around him that I have ever encountered who didn't leave the interaction in extraordinary fear, thinking, this is the last person on the universe that I want to cross. And it's crazy for me to think about that. I look at Jeffrey Epstein and I see this big dork, right? This big nerdy-ass dork. And it's so foreign for me to think that people could be intimidated by him. But then you start to think about the people he rolls with, the people he's involved with, the money he has, the access to ex-intelligence agents or current intelligence agents even. And the picture becomes more grim, right? You start to understand that you're not just dealing with Epstein or his trafficking ring, but you're dealing with his gigantic bankroll and the serious people that he can hire with that money. And would that include the very powerful people? Didn't he collect videotape of powerful men in compromised positions? Well, I think that's always the suspicion, right? I don't know that there's ever been confirmation that he's kept any video of any powerful people doing any improper things in his home. I never came across any videotapes, for instance, of that happening. I think that he would allude to it sometimes too. But whether that was true or whether he was creating that illusion to kind of bolster his prominence, I really don't know. I think that, Brad Edwards isn't shooting from the hip, folks. He's being very, very straightforward here. He isn't using any kind of speculation. He's only talking about what he knows. And I think it's important when it goes to establish his credibility that he's not firing off all kinds of crazy, weird conspiracy theories or anything like that. He's sticking right to the facts and what he knows. I think that it's very fair to say all the powerful people knew that he was well connected and was not beneath using whatever information he had to embarrass others or compromise them or put them into a compromised situation. And you see right here, Bradley Edwards says straight up that Epstein wasn't above these moves. But again, Epstein was shrewd. He was very, very capable of hiding what he was up to. And we have to always remember, folks, it's not what we know, it's what we can prove. We can speculate about what we know, and we can talk about it, and we can try and find the evidence for it. But until we can prove it in a court of law, we have to keep grinding. I think that it's very fair to say all of the powerful people knew that he was well connected and was not beneath using whatever information he had to embarrass others or compromise them or put them into a compromised situation. Where is Ghislaine Maxwell, to the best of your knowledge, and what is she up to? I don't know where Ghislaine is, but I know that she recently filed that lawsuit against the estate of Jeffrey Epstein in the Virgin Islands, asking for the estate to pay her attorney fees, in part so that she could remain in hiding. I think by her own admission she's hiding. Where she's hiding? I don't know. Yeah, I don't really have much to add to that either. I have no inside information on Ghislaine Maxwell. I don't know where she's hiding, right? I wish I did. I'd call the FBI, that's for sure. I wouldn't be talking about, oh, I have inside information about Ghislaine. Follow me and I'll tell you about it. No. The second I get information, I disseminate it right away. The second I get it, after I vet it, make sure it's legit, we talk about it on the podcast. And I believe that that's important. I believe that's important if you're credible and you want to, if you want to set the tone, right? As somebody who's reporting the case, this case it's not about me. It's not about enriching myself. It's not about money. Believe me, if it was about money, I certainly wouldn't be here with you guys every single day like this, especially with the way ad revenue is collapsing right now. But that's never been my motivation here. My motivation has always been from the standpoint of an investigative journalist and a concerned citizen, somebody who has just had enough of all the deception, all the BS going on at the very high levels of government, and then you see something like this come across your desk, you see this sort of case pop up, and boy, oh boy, let me tell you what, did it fire me up? Did it motivate me? And as the case has unfolded, I've just been more motivated each and every single day. I've been here now 177 straight days, folks, reporting on this case. Every single day, haven't missed one. And I believe that's important because as we follow the case, there's so many twists and turns that unless you're reporting on it and in long form information like a podcast or a YouTube video, it's very hard to follow this case. Do you believe there is an active FBI investigation into Maxwell? I believe that it's still an active, ongoing investigation. The prosecutors in New York have done an exemplary job, but are really hamstrung by the way the government treated Jeffrey Epstein the first time. I want to believe that, right? I want to believe that the prosecution is really going hard in the paint. And you have to think as the lawyer for the gals that you're not going to want to poke the prosecution, right? You want to make sure that you're not speaking out of the pocket. So it's smart for Bradley Edwards to take this approach here. I don't disagree with him for taking this approach at all. But as somebody on the outside looking in, I can tell you that I don't believe the prosecution is doing enough. I believe that they're dragging their feet, and I'd love to see some more action out of them. What do you make of the rumors that Maxwell and Epstein worked for some intelligence agency? I did encounter at least one witness that gave me very believable, credible information that was startling, that gave me the clear impression that Jeffrey Epstein at least had direct contacts through intelligence agencies, and that struck me as true. Wow. There you go, Bradley Edwards telling you right there. Look, again, it's one thing when journalists tell you, it's another thing when Bradley Edwards himself comes out and says he believes that dog hunts, that he believes there's something there. And you know how I feel about the intelligence angle in this case. 100%. 100%. They're the only people powerful enough to protect Epstein the way they had. They're the only people powerful enough to get him that kind of sweetheart deal in this country. Who else do you think wields that kind of power, man? Only the CIA, the NSA, the NIA, places like that. No other organizations have this kind of power, folks. I didn't think that the witness had any motivation to make that up, and I've had conversations with Epstein about the fact that at some point in time he was working with the government, with the U.S. government, to recover money that the government had been defrauded, and that he was like a financial bounty hunter. That's something that he told me personally. So you see it all come together, right? Jeffrey Epstein, the CIA, you already had connections. Enter Ghislaine Maxwell, that's the Mossad angle, put them both together, and boy, oh boy, do you have yourselves a honey trap. Do you have yourselves quite the intricate blackmail operation. When you look at the allegations that Ghislaine's father, Robert Maxwell, was associated with intelligence agencies, and it's right after his death that Ghislaine meets Jeffrey Epstein, it would seem irresponsible to ignore all of those signs that seem to point to one or both of them having contacts with intelligence agencies, whether they're associated or not. 100%. Just got to follow the evidence, right? Follow the breadcrumbs. And again, it's not about what we know, but what we can prove. So we have to just keep on it. Keep pounding this point away, keep searching for evidence, and eventually something's going to pop. Which country's intelligence agencies? It only looks to me like the United States and Israel. 100%. Again, folks, this is what I've been telling you from the very beginning, before I had access to any of this. And for me, it was obvious that there was a Mossad angle because of the way the operation was being run. And for those of you who know me personally, or for those of you who have been listening for a while, you know that my main appetite is Near East policy, the Middle East. So I'm very familiar with the way the Mossad operates. I'm very familiar with the way they conduct themselves. And I'm very familiar with the sort of operations they run. But I knew that they were never going to be able to run that sort of operation on American soil. They're working as a tag team, right? The Mossad and the CIA, they always work hand in hand. So it would be negligent to believe that they weren't working hand in hand when it came to this. Do you think Maxwell and Epstein were running some kind of blackmail factory? Jeffrey Epstein had to be in absolute control of everything, so he had to know what everybody around him is doing at all times. So did he surveil all of the main females in his life? Absolutely. Did he have their passwords to get into their emails? I would have no doubt whatsoever. Did he have surveillance cameras set up at every aspect of his property that he also monitored when he needed to? Absolutely. Everything he could do so that he could know what all of the people around him were doing at all times, he did that. He really did micromanage this big chessboard of people, and it was only so he could use anything that he could learn against them to further cause them to feel indebted to him and manipulate them for his own selfish purpose. Everything that he did revolved around control. Wow, bang, bing, boom, right out of the park with that one. It's all about control with these people. All of these people care about is control, power, and enriching themselves. Not in that specific order either. But those are the things that they care about, and Jeffrey Epstein was no different. The FBI seized a lot of evidence from Epstein's safe in Manhattan, including fake passports and diamonds. What other materials were taken from his properties, and will we ever see it? In 2008, Jeffrey Epstein was first caught, and I think that he destroyed a lot of the tapes and other evidence. Then, from 2010 through the time he was arrested in 2019, he started accumulating other naked photographs of females that he had taken either by himself or by Ghislaine, and he kept those as trophies. That's important. Remember I talked about serial killers and how they kept trophies and how it was very similar to Epstein? Right here, Bradley Edwards says it as well. And I knew for a fact that he shared a lot of traits with serial killers because, you know, it's another thing that I like to research, right? I definitely, I find it intriguing to read about that sort of thing. I think it's fascinating to read cases of how serial killers were caught and their psychology, et cetera, et cetera. And Epstein shared a lot of similarities with them. I think there are surveillance videos that were also kept as trophies, and that a lot of that, if not all of it, was confiscated in the raid of his New York mansion. I think that the FBI has all of his trophies of young females that he accumulated after the 2009-2010 period. So they have all of this evidence and no arrests, huh? Interesting. In a defamation case filed by one of the survivors, Virginia Roberts, against Ghislaine Maxwell for calling her a liar, the court publicly released hundreds of pages of documents the day before Epstein died, with new allegations involving Energy Secretary Bill Richardson and Senator George Mitchell, for example. Many other famous men are believed to be battling in court right now to keep the rest of those documents redacted or sealed. How many more big names are in the Epstein case and still held confidentially? I do think that there is a need for everyone to be careful with this, because just because somebody's name is mentioned doesn't mean they did anything wrong. I've said that a lot of times here as well. We have to be very careful, right? We have to be very careful who we put on blast. We have to be very careful how we classify these people. Now, I'll never shy away from calling somebody an enabler. People that were around Epstein, people that knew him, people that really knew him, that were hanging out with him, that turned the other cheek, those are enablers, and I'll call them that right away. But you have to be very careful about who you put involved in the ring. And that's why I stick to the people that Virginia Roberts has mentioned. Until we have evidence pointing somewhere else, I'm not going to deviate from the facts in this case. I'm not going to obfuscate. I'm not going to put out disinformation. And I see that Bradley Edwards takes that same route, and that gives me a little bit more faith in the process I've chosen here, because I want to make sure that this podcast is as factual and as truthful as possible, because that's the most important part, right? That we're going off of right information, and real evidence. This isn't a fishing expedition. It doesn't need to be. There's plenty of real life evidence here in this case to follow. But because of the public belief in the terms of who Jeffrey Epstein is, there is the natural inclination to assume somebody is guilty by just mere association. Having been the lawyer in the case, I understand both sides. I think it would be best if everything was released and people could see it for what it is. I really don't know how many other names or how many other documents are going to come out, but I think the balancing test is tough. And I agree with that, right? Just because you're named in the files doesn't mean you were involved. You might be a witness. You might be a material witness, etc., etc. That's why it's important for these documents to come out, so it ends all of the guesswork. So people can really look at the documents and say, all right, this person, directly implicated. These people enablers, and these other people material witnesses, or however it might unfold. But it's important to get those documents out so it's no longer speculation, and then it becomes a matter of record. Do you think the survivors got justice? The day that he was arrested was a day after a decade-long, constant, grueling battle, and they felt some sense of justice at that time. There was some closure. Jeffrey Epstein's last robbery of his survivors was to take his own life, so that all they had achieved by finally getting him in custody was once again stolen from them. Look, whether he killed himself or he was murdered, whatever it may be, the fact is, he's not wrong about what he's saying here. Justice was snatched from these survivors once again by him dying. Having watched this whole thing play out, how can the public be sure prosecutors don't do these sweetheart deals for rich predators in the future? Through our case, we shed light on the illegal deal that was created for Jeffrey Epstein, which will make it nearly impossible for them to replicate. And we've increased the rights of victims under the Crime Victim Rights Act through the case, which will make it much more difficult for this to be replicated. So if we've accomplished anything, it is shedding light on this unbelievable injustice that happened, so that it's not replicated again, for sure. And that's why it's important that there's independent content creators that are coming out reporting on this case. Because going forward, we can never let this happen again. We can never, ever, ever let this happen again. I know that I'm going to be much more aware going forward after this case about this sort of thing happening at the very top of society, because it's been proven that these people in general are sick and they don't care about the rest of us. Just look at the way they conduct themselves with their endless wars, running away to their mansions and their compounds while people are dying. One person dying every 4 minutes in New York right now, whatever it may be. So, these people don't care about us. They don't give a damn about us. So we have to make sure that we're very aware of the people we elect. We have to make sure we're very aware of what they're doing once they're in office, and we have to be even more aware of the unelected bureaucrats that infest these intelligence communities, these intelligence agencies, because these people are really the problem, in my opinion. These are the people that are behind the shadows, they have no names, and they're involved with people like Jeffrey Epstein all around the world. Well, I'm here to tell you, enough is enough. Like JFK said, the CIA should be scattered to the four winds. All right, everybody, if you'd like to contact me, you can do that at bobbycapucci@protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI. You can also find me on Twitter at BOBBY_CAPUCCI. Also, if you haven't checked out my new podcast yet, you can find the link for that in the description box. The name of the podcast is COVID-19, the pandemic that changed everything. So far, there is one episode out. Tomorrow, episode 2 will be dropped. And the title of episode 2 is, It's Just the Flu, Bro. We're going to discuss how bad and how destructive that narrative was for not only America, but for the rest of the world. All right, folks, like I said, I'll be back with 2 more episodes today. So I hope everybody has as good of a day as possible. And I hope to hear from all of you in emails and to talk to all of you. And yeah, I'll be back later on with some more juicy content.